This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcasting Network. I'm your host today here on this Tuesday edition of the show, Josh Strickland, and we have a show. Going to be honest with you, it's all right. We're going to talk about the NBA competition formats, potential formats that are in play. We'll talk about the college football answers, about the return from coronavirus. There's a bunch of different answers going around. We'll get to the bottom of that. We're going to do I'm going to go over a story about collecting baseball cards, or cards in general, which I thought was interesting. Then we're going to talk about James Harden boot camp, which I thought was also an interesting little article. And then we'll talk about the draft review of the Carolina Panthers, my favorite team. And I mean, I have a little bit, I had a little personal touch to that. But first, we're going to talk about the NBA coming back. They are in serious talks to restart their season in Orlando at the most magical place in the world, Disney World, being the front runner. So this has been talked about before. Everybody knew that the NBA's biggest plan at the moment was to go do the season, finish the playoffs in a bubble. And the biggest thing was, where would they do it? There were rumors about being in Las Vegas. There were rumors about it being in Disney World. And now we're getting some serious talks to restart the season in Orlando, in Disney World, which makes sense because Disney World, the park is closed. You have the ESPN Wide World of Sports there, so you have plenty of areas for basketball to be played. There's plenty of hotels there, so the teams can stay in their own hotels and be quarantined and stuff like that. So this is a pretty good setup here for the NBA. So Orlando's Walt Disney World Resort is the clear frontrunner to become the NBA's playing site to resume the 2019-2020 season amid the coronavirus pandemic. So sources said. So the NBA is in serious discussions with Disney about the property, which has gained clear momentum over cities such as Las Vegas. Sources said it remains unclear when the games would begin, but multiple sources say the prospect of players fully training in mid-June and playing by mid-July has been the most popular and possible scenario discussed. So Adam Silver told the Board of Governors on May 12th that he aims to decide on the season in 2 to 4 weeks. We discussed that when that was the headline, and he wants to wait as long as he can to make a final decision. Well, we're kind of getting close to that 2 to 4 weeks here. We're about 2 weeks out from that. It's the 26th, so we are actually exactly 2 weeks out from that. So, I mean, this could be preliminary talks or it could be serious talks. We don't know yet. So while the league has explored the possibility of holding games in multiple cities, it appears likely that Orlando would be the sole host. Sources confirm that Houston, as first reported by The Ringer on Wednesday, has also received serious consideration as a host city, which that doesn't really make much sense to me. Houston's one of the most populated cities in the whole world, not just in the United States. And I'm not sure. I mean, they have the infrastructure and all that to hold something like this, but there might just be too much people there to be a singular host city. Orlando is on track to win its bid so long as final details regarding testing and hotel use are resolved. So for the NBA, Orlando/Disney World's controllability as a playing site with a private property having the necessary complexes, hotels, and amenities has been the most appealing of all the possibilities all along, which makes a lot of sense. Like I said, Disney, they have like a whole buttload of hotels around there. Orlando in general has a buttload of hotels, and then you have Disney just has the infrastructure. That's basically the gist of that. So NBA Commissioner Adam Silver informed players on May 8th call that he hopes that the league will be able to have daily testing with no stoppage of play if and when a player tests positive, and isolating anyone who does test positive in the quarantine. Silver also told the Board of Governors last week that he does not expect a medical bubble, but an environment in which people can re-enter and undergo retesting. So the synergy between the NBA and Disney, this is going to be very important. So Disney owns the league's main media partner, which is ESPN. The synergy has played a pivotal part here. Disney executive chairman Bob Iger has strong relationships with Adam Silver and the NBA Players Association president Chris Paul. Iger even attended the NBA's remote Board of Governors meeting on April 17th when he discussed the situation with the league's owners and made a central point about the coronavirus that remains true. It's about the data, not the date. He reportedly told the owners in that meeting on April 17th. Yet since then, the data has improved in the kind of way that opens the door for the NBA return in Orlando, while Florida has the 9th highest number of coronavirus cases in the U.S. and is 11th in deaths with 1,997 at the time of this article. Orange County, where Orlando resides, has been among the safest spots in the state. According to the New York Times, the county has had 1,698 cases, which is 3.6% of the state's total, and only 37 deaths, which is 1.8% of the state of Florida's total. So local regulations have paved the way for the NBA as well, as Florida has been partially reopened since May 4th, and Governor Ron DeSantis has consistently campaigned for pro sports teams to resume their seasons in the state. So on May 14th, an agreement was reached between Walt Disney World and its workers' union on safeguards to protect its employees from coronavirus, a hurdle that needed to be cleared before an eventual reopening of the park. So some shops and restaurants are expected to open on May 20th. Some of the park, the Disney Springs Shopping and Dining Complex, already reopened on Wednesday. So Disney is starting to reopen, and they have pretty much put themselves in a spot to be the place for the NBA to go to, which, like I said, it makes a lot of sense. You got the ESPN Wild World of Sports. NBA and Disney have worked together plenty of times before with no issues there. So this is going to work out perfectly for the NBA as long as they can get the testing down and all that. And it's really nice that we're starting to actually get signs of sports coming back. I mean, we're about 80 days into this without sports. 3 long months without sports, pretty much. And we're starting to get some optimism back here. And things are looking up. Things are looking to be great. June and July are going to be huge months. You have the NBA playoffs, of course, returning. MLB considering returning if they can get their financial issues settled. And it's looking to be a pretty exciting summer. But one of the main questions is, since they're starting the playoffs so late, how is the next season going to work? Are they going to start next season on time? Are they going to push next season back? And when do we get a normal sports schedule back? Which is another huge issue in my opinion. We got to figure that out as well. But that is, of course, not an issue at the moment. Obviously, the main issue right now is that we need to start playing again, and that's what we're trying to do at this moment in time. So, NBA, serious discussions with Disney. Disney has the infrastructure, they have the hotels, they have the way for players to get around. It just makes sense. They have the basketball courts for the ESPN Wild World of Sports. If you've never been there, they have plenty of facilities for everything. That's where I think the Braves used to do spring training there. Not positive on that one, but it's got infrastructure there. It's got the facilities. It's got the money, first off, to be able to hold all this. And with the Disney parks closed, less people, some shops are going to start opening up, as the end of this article mentioned. Some shops are going to start opening up. But for the most part, the parks themselves are closed to the public, so there shouldn't be any wild cards there. So it's looking more and more likely this is what's going to happen. So, pretty excited. We are all pretty excited about the NBA coming back. because I can't watch NASCAR, guys. I just can't. It's just not a thing. It's not a thing I can do. I can't watch NASCAR. But it's great. It's great to hear that we are making progress here on sports coming back. It really is great. But, however, when we come back, we will be talking about a GM survey that will reveal competition formats that are in play when we do come back for the resumption of the 2019-2020 season. We'll go through what questions got asked and other things of that nature. We'll talk about that when we come back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So we officially have the place set. We have the place in place, I suppose, is a way to say that. But we have the place in place. But what is the format going to be? That is another question that has been asked throughout this whole process of trying to get the resumption of the NBA back. We've talked about many different scenarios. We've talked about just going straight into the playoffs. We've talked about playing 10 regular season games just to kind of make the regular season seem fine. We've talked about playing like 5 regular season games just to kind of round everything out and make the records not look weird in the record books, stuff like that. We've discussed all of these different formats, but nothing really official has come out about it. Now, this is technically not official either. This is just an NBA-issued GM survey, but it reveals competition formats that are officially in play. We're going to discuss that in a little bit. But discussing the formats, I think before I even go through this, I think the ideal format would be to play a little bit of warm-up games. I feel like it's a very unnecessary, like if a team has no chance of making the playoffs, I think it's very unnecessary to bring them into the fold and get those players and those staffs. I don't want to put them in danger, because I feel like there's no reason to put those guys in danger if they have no chance of making the playoffs. I mean, I suppose they can get extra money or they can get their full pay or whatever, but I think it would be very unnecessary to do that to these players and these staffs that have zero chance at making the playoffs. Because the main reason we want to continue the NBA season is because of the playoffs. We were so close to the playoffs. We were so close to seeing LeBron James versus Zion Williamson potentially in the first round of the playoffs. We were so close to seeing the Clippers versus the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals or something like that. We were close to seeing what would happen in the Eastern Conference with all the great teams that are over there, with the 76ers, the Celtics, and the Raptors still being pretty good, but of course, Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. So it is very, very important that we get this done, because there is some fun basketball that needs to be played, but we need to figure out this competition format. So I think the best format would be bring any team that still has a chance at making the playoffs and have every team play like 5 or so games, just kind of round out that record, and then go straight into the playoffs. And if you didn't make the playoffs, sorry, you can go home. You don't have to play basketball anymore. You can start your off season. You can start your official off season. And if you make the playoffs, of course, you make the playoffs, because it is a little unfair. It would be a little unfair for, say, a team like the New Orleans Pelicans. They are like 4 games out or something like that. The Memphis Grizzlies are currently in that 8th spot, I believe. But the Pelicans are 4 games out, and they really don't have a chance at making the playoffs if they don't play these games. So you need to give them a chance, and you need, it might seem a little unorthodox, but you need to give them at least a shot at being able to make it into the playoffs and stuff like that. So, anyways, the NBA has sent a survey to its 30 general managers regarding the competition formats for the resumption of the 2019-2020 season. So this continues the NBA's process of gathering information and input from its organizations prior to a restart amidst the coronavirus pandemic. GMs received the survey late Friday night, which included polling on whether the NBA should do a play-in tournament, the preferred number of teams to enter the playing site, and the preferred number of scrimmages or regular season games prior to the playoffs. So the feeling is that the GMs across the NBA believe that this survey allows them to have input, but also believe the league's ultimate decision-making power remains in the hands of Commissioner Adam Silver and the Board of Governors, as well as the players. So further clarity is expected to come during this upcoming week, but there's still several questions remaining regarding the format and testing on the playing site. NBA is in serious talks with Walt Disney World. We discussed that in the last segment. So according to multiple sources, the NBA, led by Silver, has held a conference call with GMs on last Thursday, in which several notable topics were discussed, such as a 2-step approach to the start of games. So a 2-week training camp in the team's market to get the teams back in shape, and then a 2-week quarantine training camp in the playing location to kind of get them used to playing at that location and get used to the quarantine setup, which makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Then players are resistant to full nasal swab coronavirus tests. As a result, the league is working on acquiring more comfortable testing via saliva or via the tip of the nose. So if you don't know, if you haven't seen any of the videos, I'm pretty sure everybody's seen a video of it, but one of the best coronavirus tests at the moment is sticking the swab full up your nose, like very far in your nose, like way farther than I thought the nose could go. It stresses me out to watch it, I'm going to be honest, and I really I hope I never have to go through that, but it looks painful and it looks terrible. They don't want the players to go through that every single day, so they need to figure out on acquiring more comfortable testing via either saliva or via the tip of the nose. I don't know about the tip of the nose thing, I've never heard of that one, but, it might be a thing. So once in the bubble site, teams could share support services. This includes doctors, security personnel, and that's to lessen the number of people involved. So that makes sense. You want the least amount of people involved as possible to keep things running and less exposure for everybody. So the GMs then received a survey late Friday night in which they were able to vote on a series of scenarios, and here are these scenarios. So we got, I'd say, about 7 of these. So first one, advance directly to the playoffs. 16 teams, 4 rounds, best of 7 series, with postseason teams based on standings as of March 12th. So this is probably going to be the most popular option, except if you're like the New Orleans Pelicans or you're very close to being the playoffs or something like that. So this is probably the most popular option amongst fans because it's going to be the easiest one to do. You just bring 16 teams. It'll be easy. It's just quick and easy, basically. You still get the playoffs. You still get enjoyable games in the playoffs. It's going to be a shorter gear up time for teams to get ready for it. And then, it's just the playoffs. It's the NBA playoffs that everybody will watch no matter what happens. So that's probably the easiest scenario to go through, and that's probably what most GMs are probably going to vote for. So, a playoff plus option. So, expanding the number of teams with the opportunity to play, either through holding a play-in tournament to determine the final seeds in the playoffs, to be played by bubble teams, or replacing the first round of the playoffs with a group stage. So, this is kind of a more complicated scenario. This is kind of more to get every team in on the action, which I feel like this is great for the teams that are on the bubble. Like I mentioned before, the Pelicans and stuff like that. They're on the bubble, so they deserve to have a chance at, playing. But you want to have the least amount of teams. So this playoff plus option is probably the second best scenario in my opinion, but it's still kind of iffy on that one. So, and if the playoffs plus, how many teams should return to play? That was the next question. How many teams should return? 18, 20, 22, or 24? The next option is to resume regular season with all 30 teams. All teams play same number of games, which is the basic scenario of every team comes in, plays 5 to 10 games or whatever to reach 82, and then we go into the playoffs from there. Resume regular season play with all 30 teams, plus a play-in game. So all teams play same number of games, followed by a play-in tournament for the final seeds and traditional playoffs. That could be interesting if you really want to have all 30 teams there. A playoffs plus play-in format option, so a play-in tournament featuring bubble teams for the 8th seed, a play-in tournament for the 7th and 8th seed, or group stage that replaces the first round of the playoffs and all participating in groups. Each team plays 2 games against each group opponent, and top 2 teams from each group advances to traditional second round. That one is extremely complicated. You're kind of doing a World Cup type deal there. I feel a lot of the teams that are in the playoffs will probably not go for that, but a lot of the teams that didn't make the playoffs, they'll be perfectly fine with that. So who knows? The scrimmage games prior to really restart, 2, 3, 4, 5. You gotta have some games to warm back up. Total regular season games 72 or 76. The playoff format, either a traditional East-West playoff format or reseed every single team, which that could be interesting. That could be an interesting one. Then you have roster considerations, the possibility of limited roster expansion, choice of 1 to 3 additional spots will allow teams to have more players on its inactive list, the possibility of expanding playoff rosters for all playoff teams, possibility of allowing two-way players to be eligible for playoffs, and then the latest possible date for a finish, which you have these choices of Labor Day, September 15th, October 1st, October 15th, or November 1st. So as evidenced by the GM survey and conversations to close the week, the NBA still must reach a point of feeling comfortable on a return to play. As Silver told players on a call this month, the NBA will be choosing from a lot of bad options and none that are risk-free. So the NBA will hold a Board of Governors call on Friday, May 29th, this Friday, to kind of figure out the rest of this. So there you go. We got some competition formats. They're all very interesting. I think the simplest one is just go straight into the playoffs. That's just my opinion. But when we come back, we are going to talk about college football again. We're getting answers, but they're not all going to be the same. We'll discuss that when we come back.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, You can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So college football, they are starting to open facilities. We discussed that on Sunday's show. They are starting to open everything up in small groups, small group of players allowed in at one at a time. But it's very interesting because college football is very non-uniform. It's not like the NBA or the NFL where you can just move a team somewhere else and they can just play in a bubble. You can't do that in college football. There are, let's see if I can, there's like 150-ish teams, 130-ish teams in Division I. Power 5 alone has 60 to 70-ish teams. And they're all from different regions. For instance, the main issue is the California teams, the teams from California, because California has one of the harshest restrictions right now because in response to the COVID-19. So teams in California are going to be struggling to figure out what they're going to do. They're going to have issues doing everything. But then you have a state that's right next to them, Arizona, who is opening everything up. They're perfectly fine with everything as is. They're opening everything up. Then you have, of course, the states in the southeast where they need college football more than anything, so they're starting to open things up now, starting June 1st, next Monday. So we are getting college football answers, but they're not all going to be the same because of that main thing I just told you about. So after months of nothing but questions, answers are beginning to trickle in one by one. As they do, they begin to form a picture of what we might expect to see in a few months, a college football season, but one unlike we've ever seen. So a major answer came Friday when SEC presidents voted to allow athletes in that league to return to campuses, providing those campuses allow it. On June 8th to resume what the league calls voluntary in-person activities, and the Big 12 Board of Directors approved its football players to return June 15th, and athletes in other sports to return July 1st or July 15th. So what that means is that athletes will return for strength and conditioning workouts that are officially voluntary in so much as coaches can volunteer not to play the players who don't take part, which is an issue with college athletics there. So typically football players take part in these workouts for most of the spring and summer, but in addition to most schools having spring football practice wiped out by the response to COVID-19 pandemic, every school's spring conditioning program was shelved. Players have tried to make do with what they have at home to stay in shape, but that typically pales in comparison to what they have access to in a college weight room. So judging by the response from college football players, in the Athletics Anonymous survey that was published on Friday, which I believe we're going to be talking about that on Thursday. Yes, we're talking about that survey specifically on Thursday. Most players are happy to return to campus even if their fellow students aren't allowed back yet. Several SEC athletic directors were pushing to allow players to come back June 1st. Gyms have been allowed to reopen in every SEC state except for Kentucky, which is scheduled to allow them to reopen early next month. The idea behind the push was that players could be supervised better and tested more frequently at school facilities. So athletes are accustomed to being on campus when their fellow students aren't, because practice and conditioning calendars don't always fit neatly within the school calendar. But when those athletes return this time, they'll be subject to more testing and not the exams in their classes. In announcing the June 8th return date, the SEC outlined some of the recommendations for its schools, which ultimately will be responsible for developing their own protocols. So here's some bullet points from the SEC's release Friday. So, enhance education of all team members on health and wellness best practices, including but not limited to preventing the spread of COVID-19. A 3-stage screening process that involves screening before student athletes arrive on campus within 72 hours of entering athletic facilities and on daily basis upon resumption of athletics activities. Testing of symptomatic team members, including all student athletes, coaches, team support, and other appropriate individuals. Immediate isolation of team members who are under investigation or diagnosed with COVID-19, followed by contact tracing, following CDC and local public health and guidelines. And then a transition period that allows student athletes to gradually adapt to full training and sport activity following a period of inactivity. So as testing becomes more available, which is happening rapidly, schools might be wise to test more than obviously symptomatic athletes. Regular full team tests or random tests of asymptomatic players could help keep one case from turning into several. And though the data suggests the age group that includes college athletes is far lower risk of dying from COVID-19, some team members do fall into higher risk age groups such as coaches, other staff, in general. So, more testing would allow for quicker isolation of cases so infected people could be kept apart from people in at-risk populations. So the SEC isn't the only league that'll have teams back on campus. Louisville has announced that athletes can return on campus May 27th, but they won't start workouts until June 8th. Ohio State players are also expected to be allowed to resume on-campus workouts on June 8th. At all the schools that will return to workouts next month, those workouts could look different. The recent trend in weight room design was to pack together stations where multiple players could shift between exercises quickly. So those stations likely will be pulled farther apart, and at some schools, they may be taken outside. A South Korean study found that the virus spreads faster with intense workouts in small enclosed spaces. Most college weight rooms are much larger than the average gym's group fitness room, but expect strength coaches to shrink workout groups and keep players apart to reduce risk. So just because Louisville and Ohio State are returning on those dates doesn't mean the rest of the ACC and Big Ten will do the same. The states in the SEC's footprint have handled the pandemic in similar fashion, but states within the ACC and Big Ten footprints have taken radically different approaches, in part because they've been affected differently. So that's one thing coaches and administrators will have to get used to this offseason. Not everything will be uniform. The NCAA has limited on-campus recruiting visits nationwide and placed a moratorium on camps that will last throughout the summer, but the rules for the players who already are on the team will be less one size fits all and more do what you can when you can. So the first sets of teams that return to campus and begin work could help provide guidance for the ones that either choose to wait or are required by their states to wait. All of the leagues, no matter their situation right now, need to be working on protocols that will govern what teams must do if a player or multiple players test positive during the season. So the ACC and the American Athletic Conference have formed medical advisory committees to help formulate those protocols. Those don't need to be in place immediately because no teams are scheduled to meet one another until August, but the players who responded to the athletics survey did want to know how schools planned to handle cases that might arise during the season. Most players do seem thrilled to be able to return to campus, though, but they will come back armed with questions. These schools will need to provide those answers in a timely fashion. So answers can wait for some of the other big questions. Schools will have to wait on their states to issue further guidance before deciding whether to allow fans to attend games. Then, if states do allow crowds, what percentage of each stadium's capacity will be allowed to be filled? So The Athletic has interviewed multiple college officials about that earlier this week, and all are making contingency plans, but unsure what the rules will be come August and September. But after 2 months, when I don't know was the only real answer, some definitive information has arrived. This isn't going to be a normal football season by any means, which I don't think anyone really expects it to be normal at this point. But schools certainly seem to be moving in the direction of playing a football season. So, once again, college football is not uniform. It is not like the NFL. It is not like the MLB. It is not like the NBA. You can't just put them in a bubble. They are from different places. They all have different facilities. They all have different needs depending on how big or how small the team is. There's a lot of question marks all around about college football in general, but it looks like we are going to have a season. We are going to have a season no matter what, whether or not people like it or not. So it's very interesting, though, to see the differences between conferences and between teams. Obviously, the ACC, a lot of their best teams are in the Southeast and are in the Southeast footprint. I mean, the SEC has made their decision pretty much. The ACC cannot make that decision because Syracuse and Boston College are in the most affected areas. Pittsburgh is in a very effective area. So you can't just make one huge uniform decision on that. But I can guarantee you, Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, they are going to be playing. Clemson, I don't know what Clemson's doing, but I guarantee you they will be doing something come June when other places are starting to open up. But when we return, we're gonna be talking about a story about baseball cards, and it's gonna be very interesting when we come back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So it's late August of 2019. Kyle sits in his home office looking to unwind a bit before bed, as he often does before retiring from the night. He logs on his computer, navigates to a familiar site where his community of card collectors gather. He scours these sites for a specific subset of cards that have piqued his interest and scrolls through some recent offerings. Retail therapy as stress relief, he explains, which I feel that completely. He plans on going to bed soon, but then he spots a Steph Curry RPA rookie patch autograph card that he'd been keeping tabs on since last summer. Kyle is a 32-year-old who works in education and asks that only his first name be used. Openly acknowledges he fits some of the more banal stereotypes of card collector. This desk beside his computer is stacked to the brim with cards. His workspace is cluttered with memorabilia and detritus from his day job. But if his environs are in disarray, his research is not. The files on his computer are meticulous, organized by card type and serial number, fastidiously researched. He aggregated information via traditional methods like Google, eBay, Instagram, YouTube, and WorthPoint, a collectibles research and valuation site, and less traversed corners on the internet such as Chinese image search engines that are sometimes reliable, sometimes not. Among his interests are all 99 Steph Curry RPA cards ever produced. When he saw the new listing pop up on his screen, something about the card didn't feel right. He sat straight up in his chair, jolted by the surge of adrenaline that would keep him up for hours. He remembered that there had been one card from that batch with a smeared autograph, one he figured served as more or less the training wheels for other cards as Curry perfected his small, tight, cursive signature. Other aspects of the listing seemed suspect. The glare of light that obscured the card serial number and the omission of the serial number in the seller's description. Buzzing with the anticipation of a potentially explosive discovery, Kyle methodically went through each file he had, comparing the photographic image he had of each card with the one that had been listed on August 31st, 2019 for $120,000 by the seller on the West Coast. So he opened file 16. He found it. A photograph of that smeared autograph he remembered. The one listed on eBay looked virtually identical, save for that smear. Kyle decided to enlist some help. He sought opinions from a few people he knew from the Blowout Card message board forum. And at 8:43 p.m., Deadshot, Kyle's message board alias, posted his suspicions on the tile. Am I seeing this right? Steph Curry RPA, including photographic evidence of his findings, links to previous transactional history, and a theory. To me, it looks like this card was purchased at a discounted rate because of the smear, cleaned up, the patch was swapped for a nicer one, and then regraded for resale. Am I seeing this right? So within 9 minutes, there was a reply, and over the next few hours, as Kyle refreshed the message board every minute, his phone buzzed with texts and emails, input from others who had seen his post and were eager to help. Someone with Photoshop expertise sent him an overlay of the two cards, which superimposes one image on top of the other, revealing potential discrepancies in non-identical items. Once he received that, it became clear that this was a serial card number 16, altered and passed off as it were the original condition. The two cards matched up exactly. All it likely took was a Q-tip, some rubbing alcohol, and a steady hand. So, to understand the impact of Kyle's discovery and the cascade of similar revelations of fraud that had largely been exposed by a group of diligent researchers on the card collecting message boards, one must understand the nuances of the hobby itself and the sanctity of the cards these enthusiasts are toiling to protect. Unlike the world of fine art, where conservation and restoration allow for more tactile manipulation, in the card collecting world, the act of altering or trimming a card is sacrilege. While there exists some ambiguity about the extent to which one can legitimately clean a card without changing it materially, any effort to alter a card to maximize its value by bleaching it, removing blemishes, or trimming the edges to make it appear cleaner, sharper, and consequently more valuable is a cardinal sin. In some cases, it's a federal crime. The internet helped fuel the surging interest in cards, which allowed third-party sellers and consigners to make remote transactions simple and seamless. The resulting infusion of cash made card selling and collecting big business, and that helped open the door to fraud. Compounding the matter was the emergence of professional card grading companies. Before behemoths like PSA and Beckett entered the marketplace, cards were separated into 4 tiers to indicate quality. Now there are 1 through 10 grades with several permutations, even within those grades that allow for variance. So potential sellers can pay to send a card to a grading agency, which will then evaluate the card and provide a numerical designation that dictates its market value. And while this can be a valuable tool to help assess pricing and investment, it can incentivize fraudulent actors. Here's how. Some grading companies take a tiered fee service level based on the level of the value of the card graded. Additionally, though, because of the subjectivity of grading, graders will at times increase the grade of a card when it's resubmitted. There's also little to no transparency about the way numerical grades are determined or how graders are trained. All of this underscores what is at the heart of the scandal that began in summer 2019 and is still rolling the card collecting community, a fundamental tension between purists who want to see the integrity of the hobby preserved and those out to enrich themselves by exploiting a system with myriad vulnerabilities. As one veteran collector described it, it is the battle for the soul of the hobby. The scandal began with a post on Blowout Card Collecting Forum by a collector interested in purchasing a raw 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card from a family in a private sale. He held the card and took note of the edges, which felt rough. He took photos for his own records, but did not purchase the card. When he saw a 1952 mantle for sale through Heritage Auctions and graded by Professional Sports Authenticator, or PSA, at a 4.5, he identified some print marks he remembered about the card in the private sale, but thought the edges now looked much cleaner. The card sold on November 16, 2018 for $45,907. The bottom left corner also appeared to be pressed. The card that appeared again in April 2019, also graded by PSA at a 4.5, but with a different PSA serial number. for sale via PWCC, a massive auction house. The card sold on May 9th, 2019 for $58,847.50. By the time of the second sale, the collector took notice and solicited opinions within the forum. He posted his photos of the card, which were analyzed by discernible members, print fibers and print marks from the card in question, and the one in the collector's photos were then dissected in a comparative analysis, leading users on the forum to deduce that this was the card in question. This snowballing controversy was enough to prompt Betsy Huggins, director of the communications at PWCC, to address the issue in a number of posts on the Blowout Forum, defending the card by advancing the conservation versus alteration debate. The questions prompted by the mantle discovery then opened up a larger scope of inquiry. Forum members suspected that if this mantle card had been altered, other cards that had been submitted for grading in the same batch by the same seller were possibly altered as well, and started digging in on this possibility. Soon enough, users from the Net54 forum joined up in investigating this activity, and the effort's reverberations reached federal law enforcement. In August of 2019, several news outlets reported about an FBI investigation into PWCC and PSA, a third-party sports card authentication service based on the card trimming allegations that surfaced on these popular message boards. The federal probe into allegations of fraud involving some of the most prominent power brokers in the industry legitimized the exhaustive work of these online sleuths and catapulted them into folk hero status among the collecting ranks. So one of the industry's biggest fish and one of its most polarizing figures, the PWC's owner, Brent Huggins, was ensnared in that investigation and continues to cooperate with federal authorities, according to his lawyer, Jeffrey Lichtman. Lichtman, a longtime collector and high-powered criminal defense attorney who has represented the likes of El Chapo and John Gotti Jr., said he was reluctant to take Huggins on as a client. Lichtman was among the most vocal critics of Huggins and PWCC when the scandal broke. That's when Huggins was defending himself publicly and appearing in video interviews like one wildly scorned episode with Cardboard Chronicles, a YouTube channel dedicated to sports cards and collectors. During his appearance, he seemed to blur the lines of conservation and restoration, expressed the need for the industry to mature, and suggested the fallout from the controversy presented the opportunity for a stage of healing. So that appearance, of course, didn't go well. And there's so much more to the story. There is so much more to the story, and I really wish I could get to it all, but it is insane. There's this huge controversy in the card collecting community that no one knows about. No one knows about this. And it's insane that all of this is going on and nobody really knows about this. This is a federal court case, pretty much. And that is insane to me that all of this is over baseball cards, pretty much. So it's just mind-blowing to me. But when we return from the break, we're going to talk about James Harden's boot camp. What is it? What does it pertain? We'll discuss that when we return.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
So we discussed it earlier. NBA players they've been tasked with kind of working out on their own since all the facilities are closed. They're starting to open up again. But what have some of these players been doing to kind of keep in shape and get ready for a potential playoffs in Walt Disney World? Well, I saw this story about James Harden, and he has a boot camp supposedly, and this is what the story is about, and it's going to be interesting. I thought it was going to be an interesting read, and it's getting into one of the best players in the league and how he has been working out since this whole shutdown. So the combination of sweltering Phoenix heat and fatigue should have been making James Harden throw up that early May afternoon. He certainly shouldn't have been one wide-eyed, laughing in full energy, wanting to crank up the pressure, amused at his friend Christian Polk bent over nearby vomiting. After all, it was Polk's idea to head over to Tempe Butte, a mountain as it's referred by Arizona State University residents. Polk, a close friend and former teammate of Harden at ASU and current head of Edu Prize basketball, had insisted they take a trip to the mountains even though Harden had just finished working out earlier. Harden obliged, but Polk didn't expect him to go as hard as he was. Considering the amount of work they had already done in the day, 2-a-days are generally reserved for football teams and training camps, not NBA superstars on a 2-month hiatus. You know, it was kind of my idea to get him back on the mountain, Polk said, thinking that I would be able to kind of push him because I do it all the time, and then he came right back and hit the ground running. I called Earl, is what we like to call it, Polk said, laughing as he recalled the experience. James was kind of pushing the tempo so hard that I had to take a little break and get that out of me to get back to it. We all got a pretty good laugh out of that. So the real reason Harden should have been exhausted lay in Austin Allen's hands. Allen, a Houston area athletic trainer, traveled to Phoenix via Harden's request. The younger brother of NFL tight end Dwayne Allen, Justin always dreamed of playing football, but decided to make a career pivot after a nasty hip injury he suffered at New Mexico State. So despite his football and life hardships, growing up homeless and living in shelters at one point, Allen always wanted to make an impact on his community. I put focus on my second dream, Allen said. My dream was always to create a gym and help give back to the youth, to the community. So that's just what I did, started training, and it just took off from there. So Allen founded All In, E-N, it spells Allen, Sports Performance, a facility geared towards quality development and training for athletes or those interested in pushing their fitness goals. Over time, All In grew in popularity through word of mouth, and it didn't take long for Allen's program to catch Harden's attention. He reached out through a mutual friend. So like every athlete during the coronavirus pandemic, Harden wanted to stay ready during his unplanned time off. Even though his workload and usage during the regular season would warrant some time off, he understood the other side of the equation. The stoppage of basketball was so sudden that it was plausible to think that a good chunk of players wouldn't be able to maintain the regimen they're accustomed to by way of team trainers, but more importantly, team facilities. So Harden said he's been doing a lot of cardio. He's got treadmills in his houses, weights, all that good stuff. It really hasn't affected me like it's affected a lot of other players. Still, he needed to be on his toes. As the conversations between the league and the Players Association continued, logistics needed to be maneuvered. How many games would we get to play before the playoffs? Do we even get that option? So this uncertainty didn't sit well with Harden. Decisions about the league's return and structure were out of his control, but one thing he could control was his body. He wasn't going to be the player who needed to get back in playing shape. So he decided to ramp up his workouts. Harden needed space to work. He needed familiarity. And most of all, he needed the heat. So he called Polk. Harden was coming back to Phoenix. He was bringing Allen with him. On the phone, Harden and Polk discussed plans to get things in order. Had this been a normal year, Harden would head to Arizona to unwind in the offseason, Scottsdale in particular, but it wasn't the offseason. He said, "I'm not coming out here to hang out and relax," Polk said, referring to their conversation. "I want to make sure that you're getting me up early and where I'm keeping busy." So a week full of high-intensity sessions would be ideal preparation for the resumption of sports. Harden wanted to work out 2-3 times a day, mixing different techniques and specific drills curtailed to his style of play. The hiatus had caught him off guard, but the return wouldn't. He wanted to make sure everything was amped up. We kind of approached everything as if the league was about to start if he had to go play a playoff game tomorrow. A plan like this needed the input of all three parties. Polk, who played ball with Harden, thought it was the best to recreate the Sun Devils' atmosphere, doing the same things they did as college athletes. "I do my best to create the same vibe that we had here while we were at ASU," Polk said. "Not only was it a lot of fun, but we made leaps as players and athletes, especially mentally." So over the course of the week, Harden would train in Tempe, Scottsdale, and Gilbert. All three are within 30-minute drive of one another. Polk would handle the basketball workouts and mountain drills. Allen would take care of everything else related to his body. He had already spent enough time with Harden, using his prior background in basketball, previous workouts with him, and understanding his unique style of play to figure out the best way to work. "Just focus on body control," Allen said. of this week's focus, putting him in uncomfortable positions so that when he gets in those uncomfortable positions, his body's comfortable with the different movements, foot placement, and working on a little more quick twitch with his feet. So just little things like that. I mean, he's already James Harden, so it's just a small thing that we're focusing on. So since Allen first started working with Harden in Houston, he's been able to break down their sessions into components, a system he employed in Phoenix. Every morning that week, Allen would meet Harden in the weight room. Here, Harden wouldn't just lift weights to bulk up or build muscle. At 30, he doesn't necessarily need to get stronger. His body is at the point where endurance is more important in the sense of avoiding injury. He knows what his body needs, and he knows what his body wants to know. Harden's main points of emphasis in the weight room are balance, stability, and body control. Different sets of weights are used, but the goal is maintaining a center of gravity to aid his quest for achieving balance. Harden participates in yoga and pool workouts. So afterward, Harden will do a contrast work in the field, starting with drills in the sand. The point of the sand is to build some sort of resistance, making Harden to have to exert force to make moves he would do with ease on a smooth surface. Once the sand workout is done, Allen would bring him to the field. Here, Allen would bring his football knowledge into play, putting Harden through a series of running back drills. For running backs, the important things are reaction time and fast twitch actions into further reactions. To give Harden the NBA familiarity, Allen will introduce 3 or 4 defenders in front of him, where Harden will have to act as if he's half court and get the desired spot on the floor for game-like finishes. Everything we do at All In is to help in-game performance, Allen said. It's designed down to the way a player walks, which translates to the way he moves. Even the lifts in the weight room. The lifts are to mimic how a player plays, so it benefits him to have an advantage on his opponent. So when Harden was with Polk, the on-court basketball work would come, but this was more about repetition than anything. The real work would be done on the mountain. This mountain is a popular spot for those living in the area, one that Harden and Polk frequented during their days roaming the campus. This week, concerning the mountain, Harden was targeting speed and explosion, sprints and intervals. Polk would mark different spots on the mountain, and they would do a certain number of sprints depending on the day and workout. They would sprint to a spot, rest, stretch, and go higher. This would be repeated until reaching the mountaintop. So where Harden separates himself from the NBA norm is his dedication to sports science, particularly in 2 areas: plyometrics and the importance of fast twitch muscle fibers. Harden has been diligently studying plyometrics and has incorporated them into his regular routine, doing such exercises on his own before ever getting with a trainer. Though he might not be as athletic as Blake Griffin or even his teammate Russell Westbrook, Harden has elite footwork. He wanted to further enhance his quickness and his first step. So plyometrics is also known as jump training, target power, where the muscles can exert a large amount of force in a small window. For an NBA player with the ball in his hands, more time than not, this is ideal. So there are 2 types of muscle fibers that athletes work on based on the sport they play: slow twitch and fast twitch, or quick twitch. Slow twitch muscle fibers are used for endurance, most notably seen in Olympic long distance runners. Fast twitch fibers are used to quick, deliberate movements. Football players such as wide receivers, running backs, and defensive backs utilize this, but Harden's play style also dictates the importance of fast twitch muscle fibers, especially his stop-start movements, his shifty nature, and his deceleration step-back combo. So, during the course of the week, Allen learned quite a few things about Harden the person away from the training. He's down to earth, humble as a person, man. I got so much respect for him. Allen has seen all sorts of athletes come through his facility and has worked with all body types. There's a narrative around the league as far as NBA Twitter is concerned that Harden is out of shape or doesn't work hard. That's ridiculous, Allen said. He doesn't know where people are getting that from. You don't average 35 points a game and not be in shape. I think people don't understand there are different body types. There are some people that work out every day, and their body won't look like the guy that has a 2% body fat. But the performance, the guy that has a 2% body fat might not be able to have the endurance of the guy that has perception of not being in shape. And, so there's an interesting look at what James Harden is doing. It's very interesting. It's very interesting to see what these players are doing amongst the coronavirus to stay in shape. But when we come back, we'll do our draft review on the Carolina Panthers.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, folks, here we go. We are on to our next installment of the NFL Draft Review segment. We're going through every single NFL team until we reach the end, or until I drop. I don't know. But here, we're talking about the Carolina Panthers. Now, this is a little bit more personal for me. I am a Carolina Panthers fan, and the Panthers did something very interesting. Very interesting. They drafted all defense of players. Carolina Panthers, they had the Carolina Panthers, in my opinion, had two big things to deal with, and that was offensive line and defense. They had to restock that defense. You got a new coach in Matt Rule. He's a very defensive guy, and you want to get your guys in as fast as possible. So they had 7 selections in the NFL draft, and they went 7 defensive players. So let's get straight into it. Then first round pick, Derek Brown, defensive line out of Auburn. This is kind of a controversial pick because Isaiah Simmons was still on the board, and a lot of people wanted them to draft Isaiah Simmons. But at the end of the day, this is a smart and safe pick, taking Derek Brown in the first round. They could have gone the flashy route with Clemson linebacker Isaiah Simmons, but I think the teams may have been scared off of him not having a set position, which I think is absurd. I think that's stupid. That's a stupid reasoning. But anyways, as for Brown, he figures to be plugged in right away on the Panthers defensive line. He has everything you want in interior defensive lineman: quickness, power, and a high motor. Brown has a very high ceiling that he could eventually break through, but it's an incredibly high floor that makes this a very smart pick. The Carolina Panthers also found themselves a very high character player who will be a professional through and through. I would not be surprised if he's voted a team captain by year 2. I do not believe that there's any bust potential at all in Brown's game. Although it is too early to call him a future All-Pro, I think it's safe to say Brown will be a solid role player throughout his NFL career. He'll have a big impact as soon as he laces up for the Carolina Panthers. Matt Rule understands how to build a team up, and it's through the trenches. Next, you have round 2, pick 38, Yetur Gross-Matos, defensive end from Penn State. So they get a great value pick here with their second round pick, selecting Matos in the second round of the 2020 draft. The Penn State product is viewed by some as a first round talent that could develop into a solid pass rusher in the next level. Panthers fans should be excited about the potential nasty pairing of Gross-Matos and Brian Burns. The Carolina's pass rush could be something special with those two lining up on the ends. Gross-Matos seems to be very natural pass rusher, but could use some development to take his game to another level. He already has some raw pass rush moves, but if he takes the time out to craft them, he could develop into a game wrecker. In 2019, Gross-Matos finished with 9 sacks. 9 sacks in 11 games played for Penn State. Those numbers will continue to rise if he puts in the work. The reason I gave this pick such a high grade goes back to value. To grab a guy in the second round that has a first round talent is a steal. Next up, you have the second round pick 64, Jeremy Chin, safety from Southern Illinois. This is by far my favorite selection by the Panthers. They traded the 5th round pick that was acquired in the Kyle Allen trade and their 3rd round pick and got the steal of the 2020 NFL draft, which is Jeremy Chin, as a very versatile player with the ability to play all over the field. He can hold up in coverage as well as play hard in the box. Chin needs to be around the ball in order to be successful. He has a great athleticism and elite ball skills to become a real threat as a ball hawk. He could match up well versus tight ends or slot receivers as well. So the Carolina Panthers, they got great value again, which is exactly why I gave this a high grade. Chin was rated as a 48th player on the board, and to get him at 64 is an absolute steal. I'm going to move on to day 3 of the draft. You have round 4, pick 113, Troy Bride Jr., cornerback from Notre Dame. So they opted to get their cornerback in the 4th round of the 2020 NFL Draft when they selected Troy Pride Jr. from Notre Dame. Their cornerback room desperately needed some more help, and Pride Jr. is a solid addition to that. Decent size at 5'11" and 194 pounds, but he needs to be more physical. He's not a willing tackler which needs to change for him to see any real playing time at the next level. However, he does have tremendous speed and athleticism that will let him get by until he develops into a full NFL caliber cornerback. Round 5, pick 152, Kenny Robinson Jr., another safety out of West Virginia. So they continue to add to their secondary. After grabbing Chin and Pride Jr., they grab another safety. So Kenny Robinson left West Virginia to play for the XFL, and it worked out pretty well for him. He was dismissed from the university due to academic violations and opted to enter the XFL. So this could potentially help him out a bit more than if he was coming straight out of college. Even though the XFL was nowhere near the level of the NFL, they still had respectable former college and NFL coaches on their staff. He was coached up by former New York Giants defensive coordinator Team Lewis. Even though he played just 5 games, he believes he has an advantage over prospects in the draft after being coached up by former NFL coaches. Round 6, pick 184, Bravion Roy, defensive line out of Baylor. They get another middle defensive lineman. They continue to beef up the middle of their defensive line after taking Baylor defensive lineman Bravion Roy in the 6th round. Roy had a breakout season in 2019 where he totaled 61 tackles, 13 for loss, and 5.5 sacks. He's just a mediocre player until his senior season, which is why he went as late as he did. Roy won't have to come in and play right away as Carolina has Kawan Short and newly drafted Derek Brown. But this will allow Roy to take his time and develop his game properly, and also Matt Rule, former coach, is on the team as well. Then you have their last pick. Like I said, they only have 7 picks, but their last pick, Stanley Thomas Oliver III, cornerback from Florida International University. So they took a bit of a project in the 7th round of the draft. Stanley Thomas Oliver III from FIU. The 7th round is usually where you'll find the reclamation projects or guys you're willing to take risk on. So Thomas Oliver III is a converted receiver after making the switch to cornerback after his sophomore season, which is why he's extremely raw. His early turnout was good, totaling 40 tackles and 1 interception in his first season in corner. He topped that his senior year, posting 54 tackles, 2 sacks, and 1 interception, including 8 passes defended. So the Panthers may have found something really special with their final pick, but he will be a project. Do not see anything wrong with taking a project player this late into the draft. This is a gamble I would probably bet on considering how well he fared early on. So the Panthers overall, they managed to get solid value on all 3 days of the draft. There were some steals on day 2 along with the understandable selections in day 3. The first round was a throwaway grade because everyone already knew how good Derek Brown is. There's little to no risk of him not panning out. But part of me would have liked to see Isaiah Simmons land in Carolina. I mean, that's just me being a homer. However, in the 2nd round, Carolina got not 1, but 2 steals in Gross Matos and Southern Illinois defensive back Jeremy Chin. Both were fantastic values, which resulted the Panthers getting a very high grade in this year's draft. Not to mention that the Carolina Panthers had to give up what the Panthers had to give up for Chin was not a lot. So basically they traded Kyle Allen and a 3rd rounder for Jeremy Chin, which we won't know for sure, but it's a safe bet to call this one a steal. Gross Matos was a 1st-round talent. The Panthers were able to land him, staying exactly where they were at 38. So as for the day 3 picks, they all have the potential to one day contribute on defense, but some more than others. Pride Jr. may fill in rather quickly due to the lack of depth at corner, but I think he will be up for the challenge. The Panthers set a goal for the 2020 draft to beef up their defense, and they certainly did that. They used all 7 of their selections on defensive players that can either play right away or maybe one day down the road become important role players. So they needed help on defense. They drafted help on defense, and I mean all the help on defense. As a Panthers fan, there's some concerns. Obviously, they weren't going to take a quarterback. They got Teddy Bridgewater. They weren't going to take a quarterback mostly because none of the better quarterbacks were going to be available. I mean, I suppose Jordan Love, but I knew the Panthers weren't going to take a chance on Jordan Love. But you had Jordan Love there. The receiving core is actually going to be one of the best receiving cores in in a while for the Panthers. Offensive line is still an issue, but the Panthers made some trades to kind of address that issue. So we'll see how this all pans out. Going straight defense is very interesting, but Matt Rule, brand new coach, he is ready to get everything done and get that defense back into shape, which they're going to need if they want any help in that division, because that division's quarterbacks are insane. So we'll see how this all turns out for them. But that is it for me, ladies and gentlemen. This has been the Tuesday edition of the show. Thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, like, rate, and subscribe it wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Strickland_Josh. And I hope you all have a great rest of your week. I'll see you all on Thursday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.